It's, I ask people, what time zone do they live in? They go, what do you mean? Past, present, or future, right? Like, if you're in a conflict, how old are you feeling right now? And a lot of times I had this one client, she said, I felt 8. I feel like I'm 8. And one of the things we were talking about was her relationship with her husband, intimacy, being close, joining the truth, and all that stuff. And she felt like she was 8. And one of her presenting issues was that she was able to come to orgasm or enjoy sex, and their sex life was, and she, they both were working on it. They wanted to have a great marriage, but she just couldn't feel it. And so we did some one-on-one sessions, and I think when we get in these one up, one down, parent, child, teacher, student roles, these patterns of feeling small. I said something to her. I said, well, adults don't have sex with little girls. That's just not what they do. I mean, you want to have... So if you're feeling 8, okay, going back to the body experience here. Now, this may sound... But what happens is she's not able to feel close to her husband. She feels dominated, controlled, manipulated. And after doing many sessions with him, I didn't really... We worked on some strategies, and what ended up happening is what came back going through her family of origin is where she felt dominated and controlled from a dominant, aggressive dad, and a kind of a hailstormy kind of mom, and a emotional, love avoidant turtle. And this is what she never felt she could really grow up, right? If you think about it somatically in our body and holistically, if a woman is feeling like a child in the relationship, there's going to be contempt, there's going to be anger, there's going to be other stuff that goes in there too. And it may feel secure at first, but then it feels oppressive, and there's kind of that velvet cage that can't get out of. So, but we find out this woman is also very much a pleaser, right? So she didn't, and so she would never say no to anybody, right? She always had this, so the power and love and being able to assert in her body was not able to be able to establish external boundaries or internal boundaries, and so she just shut down. So our relationships here now, this is again where, and I always talk about relationship, intimacy, procreation, and procreation is not about having sex. It's the outcome. I mean, the outcome of sex is the creation, but procreation is about bringing forth life to one another, bringing forth that life, bringing forth and bringing your relationship into the here and now, right? Where it's not in the past. Because the most important lesson for growth in relationship is learning how to really begin to individuate and to together, right? So individuate together. It's kind of the idea of work, the connection, and the separateness, right? There's the attachment. The secure attachment is much more flexible and nuanced, rather than, let's say, the insecure avoidant that is like the island, not available, emotionally unavailable, is not really accessible or responsive or emotionally engaging in a relationship, or you have more of the insecure, anxious pursuer, kind of like the wave in that moment. And those things can come from a lot of our attachment injuries or attachment wounds, where either like you can feel smothered or suffocated or enmeshed in your family, and there was no freedom. And so maybe now that is internalized in your body. Like whenever you start feeling that sensation of being smothered, what's it remind you of? Not to go Freud on you, but maybe mother. So, right? So that's a little bit bringing the relationships in the here now. Now, this is, again, one of the things to see the other as an other. not as you or a mirror of you, and not as a perception of our own fears and flaws or limitations. Because to do this is critical to really get to know ourselves, right? Spiritually, sexually, psychologically, somatically, our body, connection, relationally. This is especially true when there is a history of trauma present in a relationship. Whether it's a aversive child experiences, and some of that could be even pre-verbal, where you just were carrying, like riding that bike, you learned the positive, you kind of learned the negative, the body kept score in the pain, so that just as that trauma causes the body to remain stuck here in that hell loop in the past, trauma can keep a relationship from being in the present, because we're either consumed with the shame of the past, or we're catapulting or future tripping, or so obsessed in trying to control our environment and the future that we never bring ourselves to the present. Because intimacy doesn't live or exist in the past or the present or the future. It can only be had here in the moment, present. To bring your relationship into the more current state, you need to be in touch with your reactions and learning ways to move not around them or circumvent the problem, but through them, to be direct. Asking your partner, can you just be here with me and give me a little support and time to figure out what I'm feeling and sensing and how it's connected to a memory. And making that bid for that connection to hold space for one another. And it's amazing what can happen when we begin to attune to one another's emotional world, how that can really begin to bring healing, because we all need a witness, right? So many of us never had a witness to our pain as children. Who's had a witness? Who was curious about you as a child? Who wanted to know? Who wondered about you? Who was concerned about your pain, your hurt? Who were able to turn to for comfort and to hold you and to give that to you, right? Right? If there was that deprivation of love or connection, belonging, safety, security, what do you think you need more of right now? Or maybe you crave it so much. Or maybe it's the opposite. You've learned, I don't need anyone. And you just shut down. It's two sides of the same coin around this attachment stuff. But finding that secure base and becoming securely functioning adults. And so each time that you are able to do this and have that emotional corrective experience also in your body, the body where you're continuing to do the self-correct till you auto-correct in the relationship, right? Till it becomes really connected to the memory, right? And that way, each time you do that again, and the further you're able to uncouple or you disentangle or heal from those trauma-laden memories, so that you can bring ourselves and our relationships back into the present, the here and now, right? The power of now. I'm not necessarily referring to the book, but that's a good book to think about now, right now. So how do we move through these trigger moments? This is probably the most important part. How do we stay connected through the chaos, through the pain, through the conflict? How do we make sure we create that secure environment of love and respect, so that trauma, again, bringing that unforced rhythm of grace, that flow, right, with grace and truth. Because trauma is never graceful. It often leaves, part of us physically and emotionally, psychologically stuck or cut off, or parts of us even exiled, that little wounded kid exiled, never to, be allowed back into the home, the tribe, the family, the mind, the body, because of the shame, the guilt, how weak that little boy felt, right? So, but with support and guidance, we can move through that stuckness and bring the child, the wounded child, to meet the healthy child. And now we have It's because all these barriers, or firemen or managers, all these things that were throwing barriers up. So, who was it? Rumi said, our task isn't to find love. Our task is to find all the barriers we set against it. And these barriers are really going to be constructed around our defense, around trauma, where we've been hurt, wounded, right? Which makes sense, right? Consider animals in the wild, right? Although their lives are threatened on a routine basis, they're rarely traumatized. So if they would lose their resilience, if so, they lose their resilience and they would eventually go extinct. But this is what it is in animals that gives them resilience, right? All mammals, including us, human beings, which are very distinct species, right, have identical instinctual fight-flight autonomic nervous systems. So, but other animals have the added benefit of remembering how to use the body to work through a traumatic experiences. For instance, animals shake, right? Literally, they shake their bodies, which allows the body to begin to process all the hormones and those neurochemicals involved in that fight-flight response, right? So you have, with all that cortisol and adrenaline and all these other things, you've likely experienced this sensation too, where you're shaking, trembling in your body, cold hands, spontaneous, deep breaths, losing your breath immediately after a scary event, right? So that panic, and maybe it might have even felt like it was someone else, somewhere else, and this feeling detached and disassociated from the experience. And anytime you get traumatized or triggered, you just kind of black out or numb out, and you don't even realize or remember what happened, right? All that stuff. So it's important that we help support each other in building that that safety net, so no one falls between the cracks, but creating that secure base, to answer that question. Are you there for me? Can I count on you? And again, if you've gone through that, it's really can be challenging to, bring that full circle and find some closure to some of that. At the same time, closing the loop in your relationship to, and this is the beauty of relationship. It's important that we help support each other in allowing our bodies to work through our experiences, really similar to how other animals do this too. The somatic experiencing, or this body sensation, or how your body is keeping score. This developed as a methodology here that we talk about which is part of the trauma-informed relationship psychotherapy part of these that imparts really basic life skills to move through these events that are really potentially re-traumatizing or traumatizing, really to gain greater resilience and that sense of freedom and self, the power and freedom to choose something different, so that your joy, you bring back the joy in your life, the play, the fun, the sexy. These are skills everyone in the world could use, and it would make for a better, safer, more even compassionate world, wouldn't you think? I mean, especially with what we got going on right now, right? We're all, this is a time for all of us to, again, rethink our values, rebuild our homes, rebuild our hearts, rebuild our minds, our relationships, and really think about who do we want to come out, who do we want to be, because we want to have this great world, right? A lot of us want to have it, but you got to be the one to have the one. You have to be and then do and then have. So that having experience can only be approached from being that person, right? So, but I have PTSD. I have aversive childhood experiences, PTSD from the military, serving, a lot of stuff. A lot of you may know my story. I've read my book, read other stuff that had occurred. But I've spent the last 25, 30 years really trying to master this and put this make it accessible to others and put this into their hands and hearts and to really, again, find ways to heal holistically, mind, body, emotions, our soul. But one of the episodes you go back and you listen to on the flight or freeze, or then freeze, right? Because a lot of times that might actually be what's occurring here, because our autonomic nervous systems are wired, again, hot wired for a fight or flight response to threat, whether, again, it's real or perceived. If that brown squiggly thing, is that perceived as, is that a snake, or is it a real snake, right? So being able to, if we're unable to fall through on either of those instincts, let's say, or our, whether what our body remembers, right? If these actions are not really suffice, or if our system becomes too overwhelmed, which happens a lot of times in relationships when you get in a fight, the man will, so one person will get really flooded, and the body will go into a state of, apathy and collapse, right? Or it freezes, right? Or it freezes to protect the relationship. But this shutdown that sometimes can be perceived as silent treatment, which it can be, or stonewalling, the ultimate form of domination. But a lot of times it may be something else. It might be just shutting down. That stage is meant to be temporary. But sometimes we get stuck there due to this frozenness due to our fears that reinforce paralysis, or even deeper yet, the shame story that we carry around in our body that sits in our gut, feeling like disgust and nausea and feeling weak. That's shut down, right? You guys know which one I'm talking about, because when someone we can trust is near us, it's possible to have less fear to truly sense the immobility and make contact with them and move through it, being in presence with these sensations to lead to kind of deactivate that hyperarousal, that arousal, and we can learn to see the memories that are keeping us stuck here. And from there, we can learn to renegotiate some of these reactions and our reactions to our reactions. And, and I always say, and it's also understanding where our fear comes, because a lot of times for guys, our fear isn't our wives or our partner. Our fear is their reaction, their trigger, and our reaction, our trigger to their trigger or reaction. And that's where we get into that whole stance, and that vicious cycle. So this is part of the thing to begin to remember, to slow this down, kind of do the play-by-play, kind of like in the NFL, right? You see this awesome play, or you see this play that didn't work or whatever. How did that play work? Slower is faster. Slowing all those emotions down so your body can catch up to what it's feeling, and then you can connect to that. Otherwise, we continue to fragment, right? So here's a good experiment to try, right? So when we have been traumatized, especially in the case of, let's say, sexual trauma, we try to isolate from our body, also, which is also known as like disassociation or soul fragmenting, or detaching from reality, whatever you want to call that. It is as if the body has betrayed us, right? And we begin to perceive our own body as the enemy, right? So this self-accept, because this is the part people talk about self-love and self-love, but I want to add self-acceptance, because here, it especially if you have a faith, Christian or whatever, moral, spiritual thing, it's like we can forgive the enemy out there and give alms to the poor, feed the poor, the hungry, have compassion, empathy. But what happens? What happens when we discover that the enemy is within, right? Or that self-betrayal? Because if someone betrays me, wow, I can just leave that person, leave that relationship, never talk to them again, right? But self-betrayal, sometimes when we do things that, or something happens, even maybe it's not even us, maybe, and again, most of the time with sexual trauma especially, sexual trauma is a violation of human connection, a violation, but we can almost internalize, interpret that, and when we're in that powerless, helpless state where you can't escape, can't flee, and then there's nowhere to go to share or have a witness to say, yeah, this is wrong, this is a violation, and there's got to be a consequence, some consequence to bring back that, to reset the system back to feeling safe and secure. That doesn't happen, right? that doesn't happen. So our body internalizes that we betrayed, and we go, oh, the enemy is within, or, there is no compassion or empathy for the poor or the beggar, because that enemy, it's fragmented, and that's the firefighter that comes in. But we can begin start by befriending and reconnecting with our body, right? A lot of us, a lot of men, and anybody that has trauma, we can't connect to our body. I mean, you'll notice if you try to look someone or gaze into someone's eyes, or, they just turn away quickly because they can't connect, or you can't connect. And so we got to start by, again, befriending and reconnecting with our own body, because if we can't connect inside here, we can't connect out there. So this is, again, paying gentle and non-judgmental attention to your own reactions and the feelings, being gentle with yourself. Because with time and self-acceptance, and because with time it becomes softer and easier for you. Every time you have that corrective emotional experience and your body is able to kind of self-regulate, right? Find internal safety, right? Rather than trying to find safety out there in someone else who's not, that's out there. We got to bring it back inside where to our physical responses, our physiological responses. So you can do this with your partner, okay? And here's the thing: I want you to agree, as you try on this experiment, agree not to have intercourse, but just to explore together, And as soon as the trigger comes up in your body, take the time together to integrate and be with the sensations in a patient and compassionate way. No force, no pressure. Know that our minds are clever. Our bodies are wise. Our bodies know what to do. They are instinctive. They just got overridden by some old bad, patterns here, trauma. But imagine what your body might have wanted to do at the time when it was violated. I know this is hard. Push away, fight, run. Find safe ways to allow the body to express the desires and needs that it had but could not follow through in the past. Where you felt choked out, you felt repressed, you felt dominated, you felt constricted, you felt subjugated, and there was no way to push away or fight or run or find shelter or safety. And there was no one to turn to after, right? So finding safety, right? The body to express that. And this brings power and energy back to your body and helps hold compassion for the wounded child, that child or that younger version of yourself that could not defend or protect itself at the time, right? And as we sort through the links and these echoes, and we test for between memories and reactions, we begin to mend again and return to a deeper, full sexual, spiritual, psychological, and physical connection with your partner. So going back to the lady that wasn't able to have an orgasm. So she had to begin working on this with safe people, her friends. For instance, one of the things I had her do was, because I said, even with 3 of the women that were closest to her, she always felt like the child in the relationship. So I asked her, I said, so what is something you could do? Because they would always say, hey, where do you want to go to eat? And she would always defer to them, right? One down. And she started saying, and I said, well, now I want you to disagree, right? Find something you want to disagree in. And there was an issue that came up that she disagreed with. It was really scary for her, but she had the corrective emotional experience by asserting and pushing harder when she felt like a child, where she was subjugated and she couldn't speak and she didn't have a voice and she felt tight in the throat and she didn't have the power and freedom to say. And so she learned to exchange her authentic true self in exchange for a false self, just to have a connection, relationship. So she made herself small, like a child. Right? So that was one of the somatic experiences we had to process, and now we get back to, practicing, just really being mindful of these things and practicing guided meditations. If you want, I do have a guided meditation I can send you free to your phone or computer or wherever you need. You can email me at joe@rebuildingconnection.com. I'm offering a hour free consultation. And then if you decide to continue working with me, we'll talk about that. But we do work a lot. I'm doing, right now, everyone's doing video and Zoom webinars, seminars. So I'm upping my podcast to do more than one a week. And we'll be opening up some ways to work together in mutual trauma with couples, whether you have PTSD or, we have other stuff too, like beyond chemistry on, how to, why we love, feel, and act the way we do. And that's going to be around understanding our attachment, these imprints, our body, and how that all kind of works together, simultaneously. But I just want to thank everybody. Be safe out there. Again, you can email me, Joe at rebuildingconnection.com, or you can go ahead and call me, 310-560-0726. My website's coming up in the next month. I've been working diligently on getting that, so you can have the videos, the podcast, book videos, everything that you want to do in one place, so you don't get, and all the articles and things that you can some downloadables and all sorts of fun stuff. All right, so we're moving a lot of stuff to the internet, and it'll all be accessible to you in one place. I'm still thinking about the name. I had one name for the business, and now I'm kind of thinking about something different. And maybe if you have some ideas for me, what you think would be a good name for the program and the what we're doing here. I'd love your ideas. I love creativity, and I love feedback. So go ahead, give me a call back or give me a shout. And if you do have questions, please, text me, email me, anything. So if you do have things that you'd like to follow up on, or maybe there's a podcast you want me to talk about something more, I do have a lot of that where you are able to just give me some feedback, let me know something you want for me to talk about. And I am inviting people to be guests on my show, or to talk about something, or work through an issue, or talk about your relationship. We're opening this up to everybody. The podcast is shifting a little bit, but I want to invite you to be a part of this. I want you to be a part of this relationship with society, this relationship society, and the work that we're doing here is to, really bring healing and real deep healing to people where there is true permanence and change. And I also have a program called Changes That Heal, and we go through about 5 or 6 videos or webinars to take you through those stages of change, changes that heal, and giving you really specific tools and specifically how to work through that. And it's good if you're single, or if you're married, or relationship, or you want to get in a relationship, or you're premarital programs. All that stuff's here. We got it all. So anything that's dealing with trauma or relationships, we're here. We hope to be your resource. Thank you, guys. Stay safe. Practice, the distance, but with connection, right? Loving people from a distance. Staying connected in this time is really super important. There's all sorts of creative ways to do that. Just follow the guidelines, and we'll all be getting through this safely and healthy, in a more health, and I hope in a healthier way. So again, Joe Whitcomb signing off here. Reboot Your Relationship, 310-560-0726. Thanks, and make this your best day ever.